Hey guys, hope everyone's doing good tonight. Yeah, that is some old Coltrane, so it's about as relaxing music as you can get, I think. Cool. So tonight we're going to talk about components. We've talked a lot about dry code. Yeah, sure. Let me drop a link to this before I get started. Go for it. So we've talked a lot about dry code pretty much since the beginning. We don't want to repeat ourselves too much, right? Because when we're copy pasting code or we're writing the same thing 50 times, we can make small mistakes that we might not see initially. It also just becomes harder to maintain. It becomes harder to read for other people that might have to maintain it in the future. So components are kind of really how we actually do that in the real world, how we make things really dry, how we make things super reusable and not worry so much about, you know, writing one-off type things. Excuse me. So tonight we are going to just kind of introduce the concept. You know, obviously we've kind of done a little bit of this stuff where we're combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make something work. So tonight we're going to talk about how we can do that on a little bit of a larger scale. So hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll be able to describe what a component is, identify parts of a component, write a function that creates elements and returns new DOM elements, and then iterate over a list of data to create a new component and attach that to the DOM. So I said last class, this is kind of where you start really feeling like an actual web developer. This class and the class tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but the day after, really kind of solidify that, because this is actually how you build websites. Like as we get into React and front end and all that stuff, this is really the basis for all of that. You know, we've been learning little bits and pieces. You know, like what classes are, what a constructor function is, how to use callbacks. You know, we've been learning all that kind of stuff as we go. But this is where we actually put it all together and start making real, like, functional pieces of software. So be hype, guys. This is cool stuff. Here's a link to the code pen if you want to follow along. So first things first, by definition, a component really is a combination of your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript in a general sense. So today we're going to be focusing on building essentially this accordion component. So we see to like remove this here. Basically, this is just here as a placeholder. Oop. So we can see what one should look like. But we're actually going to pretty much start with just an empty div that says accordion as a class. So let me put that back on there for just 1 second so we can look at the code first. Yeah, so we're pretty much going to negate the need for anything to actually be in here with DOM manipulation and adding stuff with DOM methodology, basically. So we can pretend that this is all gone, and it's literally just going to be a div tag like this. So it's going to be cool. So yeah, so that's kind of how we do the HTML bit. All we really need is basically a container that we're going to drop all of our DOM elements into. And we'll see our CSS, find accordion in here if there's even a class in here. Yeah, so accordion's just got a background color and some shadow. And then there are some other classes in here that we'll use for sub pieces of that accordion. And then our JavaScript. All we've really got in here right now is this object. well, this array of objects rather. So we have some panel data. So this is something that you actually might get like in real life to work off of, right? You'll get some amount of data and you'll have to do something to that data to display it in a visually attractive way that makes UX sense in the front end. So we're not gonna be getting anything from the server today. We're just gonna be working off of static arrays for now. But next class, I believe we're actually gonna be talking about how to get stuff out of a server. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, so tonight we're just gonna talk about basically making components with information from an array. Even before that though, I'm going to do just like just a smaller little demonstration, how to make a nice little button. And part of this is gonna be a code along too. So I'm just gonna like throw this down here somewhere. Button. Actually, I should probably drop it inside of the code just so that it's centered and everything. Class equals I don't know, DOM button. And I'll start out with some text. Hi, I am a button. Cool, so we've got this button here. Ooh, gosh, that long white line is very ugly, but I'll deal with it for now. So, first of all, we're gonna have, I'm gonna set up just like a little basic CSS class down here for it. What did I name my button? DOM button. DOM button. I'll do like background color red, width, I don't know, like 50 px, height 20 px. I'll do like 150 width. Color black. Let's see what that looks like. Oops. Border radius 10 px. I'm gonna actually make it blue because the red hurts my eyes. So this is just kind of like intro. So we're gonna be starting pretty light. We're just doing stuff that we're familiar with. Okay, cool. That's a decent looking button. Cool. So we've got our DOM button. We've got our DOM button in the HTML and in the CSS. So we are well on our way. The next part we're going to talk about is the JavaScript. And this is going to kind of be a little bit of a review of the previous nights. Just doing a little bit of DOM manipulation and getting stuff all set up. So I'm going to, how do we get rid of those? I don't know what that word means, but I'm assuming it's like the weird shadow around it. There's probably a class being attached to it from above. Let me see. Ew, gross. Yeah, there's like a border bottom of this. There's a border color of this white color. So border border 1px. Wait. solid Dodger blue 1px. See if that gets rid of it. There we go. That's one way to do it. I'm sure there are other ways. Cool. Yeah, no worries, Warren. So we're gonna just do a little bit of a review on some of the DOM stuff, like I was saying. So how would I select my DOM button? How would I do a selector for this button if I want to grab it and do some DOM manipulation? Const DOM button equals document dot query selector. Excellent. DOM button. And then remember, we're going to console log it just to make sure we've got the right thing. Yeah, great job, guys. Cool. So we've grabbed the right thing. So that's a good first step, making sure we've got everything selected properly. Let's see. I'm gonna even get rid of this text, and I'm just gonna do it through the DOM. So if I save this and run it, it's just gonna be a blank button. But I'm gonna do my button.text content equals, hi, I am a button. Come on, let's go. Oh, oops, DOM button. Thank you. DOM button. What's going on? I can't have already made a mistake in my code. I only have 2 lines. Okay, cool. So we've got our button, we've got our text set up. We can even make it even more if I wanted to add another class. So like if I wanted to add DOM button DOM button large, I could change the width to 250 pixels and the height to like 75 pixels or something. So we can even add a class just in here just to keep our skills up. DOM button dot class list dot add. DOM button large. So let's see that we get that right. Button should get bigger if I did it right. Cool. Got a big button now. Now let's add an event listener onto it. I just want to add something that maybe does a console log. I don't want to do anything too crazy yet. So we'll do DOM button dot add event listener. We'll do a click event and then my callback. Clicked the button. Yeah, then I don't need the event. Actually, I'll throw the event in there and we can just log out the target. Clicked the e dot. So if I save this and run this, click. Well, it doesn't give us a very pretty message, but yeah, that seems right. It's an HTML button element, yeah. So that works. HTML button element. Very, very excellent. Cool. So the next step from here, what could I do if I wanted to even get rid of more stuff from here? What could I do if I wanted to just get rid of the button from my HTML altogether? Exactly. I could use create element to create the actual button, and then I can prepend it or append it to the accordion. Sweet. So I'm gonna do that. So let's do document.create elements button. Actually, let me save this and run it so the button's not there anymore. Then we can do this. So I've got my button. So the only thing now here that's changed, I'm still creating the button. I just haven't added it back into the DOM yet. So if we inspect the page, I open this guy up. Oops, not the head tag. I want the body tag. Home. It's the structure here. Okay, so yeah, it's in the secondary container. And there's just an empty accordion in here right now. So we've created our element in memory. So our DOM button exists. It's just not added on to the page yet. So like we said, let's just append it. So we have to grab the actual accordion class. Const accordion equals document dot query selector accordion. Make sure we grab the right thing. Cool. So we've got that big empty accordion class. Sweet. Can do accordion dot append DOM button, and we should have our DOM button pop up. Cool. It's a bit ugly because I have to add the DOM button class back on here now. So let me do that real quick. DOM button. Save and run. Cool. So we have our pretty blue button back. So is anyone confused about what I've done so far? So this should be mostly review, right? This is stuff that we did the past 2 classes. Anyone confused on any of this stuff yet? Let me read through the chat. What is e.target? So E is just, it could be E, it could be event. Oop, I have my insert on. So it could be event, it could be whatever. E is just an abbreviation. So target just basically tells us what the event is looking at. So if we want to look at this real quick, remember our event object, it's an actual object. So if I inspect into my console here and I click, we see we have a mouse event, and one of the keys in here is going to be target. So target is just what the event is being run on, basically. It's being run on a button that has the classes DOM button and DOM button large, and then that has some sub values as well. So we could see like the class list if we wanted to. We could see any children it has, any labels, the value of it. Yeah, so all kinds of stuff in here. Get rid of that so I don't get that warning in my console. I'm glad you think this is exciting, Samuel, because so do I. Yeah, so if I'm going too fast, definitely let me know. I'm just trying to go a little quickly because this is mostly review. I'll go a little slower as I get into more stuff that we haven't really done yet. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about how we could turn this into a component, like a real component. So right now, you know, it's pretty functional. It's got all kinds of the stuff that you need for a functioning button. But what if I wanted to have another button? I could pretty much do this if I wanted to, right? This isn't breaking any rules. So if I save this and run it, I should just get another button in here. Yeah, so I've got another button. But what's wrong with this approach? It's not very dry, exactly. I'm going to have to copy paste, what is this, like 10 lines of code every time I want to make a new button. That's just crazy. Because you could have, 30 buttons on a page, for example. So, there's 300 lines of code devoted to buttons. That's just insane. So yeah, so we can simplify this a lot and basically wrap this in a function. We can do all this in a function and just reuse it. And this is actually kind of getting into making components now. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my language a little bit so it's more general. So I'm just going to make a button. Button, 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 button. Okay, cool. And then I'm gonna create my function name. So I'll do like button maker. And I should be able to literally just grab pretty much this whole thing and drop it into my button maker. Cool. So let's take a look at what we've got going on here. So I'm creating my button. Creating my button. What do I need to do to actually, this shouldn't be in here. What do I need to do to actually get something out of a function? Does anyone remember? What's the only way to get stuff out of a function? Return, exactly, return. So I'm going to be returning the button from this button maker. And let's see. Let's see what happens when I just call button maker. Oops. Yeah, let's just see what happens when I call button maker. I'm going to comment this out for now. So we get this console log. We get the console log that I requested in here. So it looks like we're making the button correctly. So that's cool, right? So we're on the right track with this. Now what I would want to do is I would want to save the buttons so that I can use them and append them, right? So I'll make, I can make button 1 if I want to, right? So I'll save button 1. And it should be just as easy as adding that button 1 in there. So let's make sure that I've done everything right. Cool. So we've got that going, so that's nifty. Now if I want to make, 30 buttons, I can do that. I can just, all I have to do is change this. And then however many buttons I made, 3, 4, 5, 6. Save and run. Cool. So I've got my 6 buttons. We're in business. I'm so happy that you're happy, Chuck. So we've got our buttons going, and this is really cool, right? But they're not super configurable yet, right? They're still pretty, like, they're all just blue buttons that say, hi, I'm a button. What are some ways that we can make our buttons differentiate a little more? We can pass the text in. That's one way, yep. So in order to do that, I'd give it a parameter of text, and then I would make the text content whatever I pass in. So if I save this and run it right now, I'm just going to get a bunch of blank buttons, right? Because I haven't actually given them any text. So I'll give them some quick text to say what they are. And remember, this is just parameters that we've gone over parameters at length. We're just giving information to the function. Excuse me. Cool. And now there's proof that these are all separate things. We've given them all separate values. And we can do this with whatever we want, right? This is almost just like going back all the way to mix-ins and parametric mix-ins. We can add in whatever stuff we want here. So I mean, this is going to be a little like, kind of like, don't do this, but you can change. You can change like the background color for all of them if you want to. So I can feed in like red, orange, blue, pink, green, green, yellow. Oop, have I made a bad? I guess I have to give these as strings. Yeah, cool. So we've got all these different color buttons. So yeah, so I mean, this extends to pretty much any property we want to on here. We could even pass in different events for different buttons if we wanted to. Like we could have an event parameter and just pass in another callback function. So any questions on this so far? So we did introduce a little bit more stuff. Let me read the chat. Michelle says, why shouldn't we do that? More just, it's not that like this is horrible, I guess. It's just, you don't really want to use inline styles in actual like production level code. You know, we've talked about why inline styles are hard to manage, and especially if you're just adding them with a DOM event, like it's going to be hard to debug if you're having problems with that. So generally you would want to just like add a class. Like you could just pass in a class name, for example, you know, just like class name or whatever. And you just add that specific class name in here instead of just giving it like a specific color like that. Jose asked, order matters in parameters, right? Yes. The first thing that we put in is going to be text regardless. So if I put in red and then button 1, it's going to give us the text red, but it's going to error out on the color and it's just going to be like whatever the default color is because button 1 is not a value for color. Let's see. What did I append to the accordion class? I appended all the different buttons that we made. So you're just appending whatever you create with this function. Could you do the even parameter just to see? I don't know what that means. It doesn't matter that you didn't use all the props you made. Props as in properties? No, you don't have to. It's just like any other thing. You can use these parameters that you feed in, or you cannot. Like you can just hard code it if you want to for whatever reason. So yeah, like if I wanted to, I could just do this and it wouldn't give me an error or anything. I just wouldn't have very dry buttons. They just all say hello now. Yeah, you have to keep them in order in that when you're feeding them into your actual call, because we're calling the function right here, right? Whenever you have your call, you have to feed them in the right order. So this order has to match the order that they're in here. Cool. Some people want to see the event as a parameter. Okay, try this. Fair warning, I have not done this in probably over a year. So I'm going to do a little bit of free coding. So let's see, events. Let's see. I can pretty much just grab this. Oop. Ah. Button. Let's see. Event. Button dot. Let me see how I would want to do this. Button dot event listener. I can click console log. I'd probably do like, this would be kind of weird, I guess. Actually, event handlers. Grab this, drop this in here. Let's see. People are talking in the chat. Let me see. Dylan says, could you copy the event listener and just pass the argument into the event listener? Pass the argument into the event listener. Yeah. I should. Let me see. Event handlers button. I can put. Let me see if this works. This isn't going to be like the complete thing, but I want to see what this does. Event const event handler button. Event handlers button 1. Okay. Cool. So you can do it this way. You could have a different event set up. You could have like a click event handler. This is probably how you would actually do it. You'd have like a click event, and then you'd have like a double click event, and then you'd have like whatever other events you would want. Or you could do it all in one function here. So like you'd have to find some differentiator for what you're doing, I guess. I'd probably honestly make just different functions for events. Let's see. You could pass an event in here too, but I feel like this would be the way you'd actually want to do this. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, like either way, you're passing a function return into a function. So this is one way to do it. Let me see if I can figure out how to do it, putting it into here. Button dot click event. Oh, button dot event. Button. Yeah, you could do it that way. I'm curious if you could do it where you like have everything just done in here and pass it in, but I don't think that you can, at least not easily. So let me see. I'm gonna keep this commented because I kind of like that. One way to dynamically add events. Another way to dynamically add events. So we could do if we want to be really dynamic with the events, could event type, event func, event type, oops. I mean, pretty much, yeah, we do event func and then drop this in here. Event func, console event function console event console.log. Hi, I am the console event. Let me see if that does the thing. Okay. Let's do, got red, we've got click, and we've got, I call it console event. Sweet. I've done it. Cool. Yeah, sorry that took a minute. It's been a minute since I did that. Cool. All right. Cool. So does anyone have any questions on adding events dynamically now? So I've shown two ways how to do that. You could make separate functions for each type of event and pass in the actual button, or you can make just a bunch of callback functions, basically. Cool. Trug says, how does that function tie in with the event listener? You mean console event function? So basically, it's just like this. It's as if I did just like replace it in here. That's basically what you do when you just put a function in there. Cool, a couple people typing. Give you guys a sec. Yeah, yeah, so there's an E right here. If I wanted to, I could console log out the E. Sweet. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna give you guys a 5-minute break and then we will continue on. So 5 minutes. Oops, not 50, that would be bad. 5 minutes and I'll see you guys back. Welcome back. Cool, so I'm going to table the buttons for a minute. And we're pretty much going to implement a more complex version of the buttons using this panel data now. So at the end of this demonstration, let me grab the complete one. So at the end of this demonstration, it should look like this, and we can click these things and open them up, and they've got all the different stuff inside of them. So that's going to be sweet. And now you know you have that to look forward to. Cool. So let me jump on back into here. So I'm gonna push that way down towards the bottom so I don't get distracted by it. I'm gonna re-grab the accordion. So const accordion equals document dot query selector accordion. Let's see. And we're basically going to pretty much do what we just did with the buttons, except we're going to have multiple HTML elements that we're adding, or DOM elements rather. So we're going to create an entire panel, an entire panel pretty much. So there's going to be a div that holds everything. There's going to be probably another div inside there. There's going to be some text and a button that opens and closes. Cool. So let's create some of those things. We're going to base them off these CSS class names. Accordion, cool. So we're going to make panel. Const panel equals document dot create elements div. We've got panel bar, and it's a div as well. We've got panel. I'm going to do panel title for the H3 element that's in there. I'm going to do panel. Yes, new button panel. We're going to create a container for the button stuff. Button open. Butto open, button open. And then button closed. These are obviously buttons. Button close, and I'm going to do panel content. So panel content will be div. Just leave that right there. Cool. Oh, and I almost forgot. Need to wrap these in a function. So function panel creator. Cool. So we've got all our creations. Let's see. Right now, they're pretty much just empty divs and H3s and all that. We haven't assigned anything to them yet. Excuse me. So let's do a little bit of adding our class list stuff. Let me scroll up and see what these names were. So we're going to add panel, panel bar. We're going to add panel bar, panel bar. Gosh, excuse me. For button panel, we're going to add button panel. We're going to add panel buttons because this is the container element. Remember, if we look, it's a div up here. So that's going to be the container for our buttons, basically. Add panel buttons. And then for our button open, we're going to add for our button, probably panel. Let me see. Is there a close in here already? Do I have to add it? Looks like I'm adding a class. Let me push these down further so I don't get confused by them. Cool. So I'm just going to add the class list stuff for now, so that I don't like I can reference it to add the CSS in a minute. So I'll do to my button open. I'll do panel button open. And I'll do the same for close, except obviously the inverse. Close. And then for panel content, I think there's a, panel content class. Cool. So we're going to run it. We're going to see that there's not anything here yet because we haven't appended stuff, really. So if I want to just append these real quick so we can see what this, like, whatever this hideous thing is going to initially look like. Oh, do I have two button opens? Oh, oops. Thank you. What did I call this one? Panel content. Panel content. Thank you. Cool. So I'm going to append these real quick so we can just kind of see our progress as we go. And we're going to have to append them in a way that makes sense, right? We're not going to append all of these to accordion. Because accordion is just, you know, it's pretty much just the holder for the container of this thing. Remember, everything in HTML is basically boxes inside boxes. So we're going to have to kind of remember where our boxes hook up to each other. So, oops. So we're going to do we're pretty much going to start from panel inside here. So panel dot append child panel bar, because panel bar is our container for the buttons. We're going to do panel dot append child panel content. And then we can start appending stuff inside of that. So panel bar, we can append a child. And we're going to do panel title. What did I make panel title? Yes, I did. Okay. Make sure. Yeah, cool. Okay, I've added panel title. Sweet. So then panel bar dot append child. Got our button panel. Oh, my bad. Button panel is the holder of the buttons. And then we can button panel dot append child button open and button close. Got everything, I think. Yeah, I think that's a start. So let's see what this looks like. Oh, I've messed something up. Oh, I haven't given it any information yet. Oh yeah, that's also a good call. I should probably like call the function, yeah. Cool. So let's go up here. We'll do const panel equals panel creator accordion dot appends panel. Oop. Undefined. Fun. Let's see what I did. No errors, so I'm probably just missing content. Oh my gosh, you are so right. God, I'm wild. Thank you so much for like catching all my like silliness, because I'm just the worst guy. Okay, cool. So yeah, let me try this now. Okay, cool. So we've got some outlines of stuff in here at least. We don't have any content in there yet, but we've got, you know, a box with some other boxes in it. Thank you. I know I always feel silly when I like make these silly mistakes, but it's just like, it's a million times more stressful when you're doing it in front of like 75 people that you're supposed to be teaching how to do this. Yeah, so thank you for not losing your confidence in me, at least completely. Cool. So we've got our classes set up at least. So, you know, it's looking decent so far. So I'm going to keep the appending to the bottom, and I'm going to add in all my other stuff in here. Excuse me. Cool. So we've created the stuff. We've added our classes. I'm going to add in the buttons. So these are just like codes. So you'll see what they do here in a second when I run it. So these are just like the up arrow and the down arrow. If you remember, these buttons had arrows in them. These are just text codes for the arrows. Cool. So now we're gonna just set our text content. Button close dot text content equals close. See that that's working. Yeah, these are Unicode functions, not functions, but Unicode codes. So we've got the arrows in either direction now. So that's looking good. We can add some other content in. We're going to run into an issue here in a second that I'm going to have you guys help me debug. Text. Oops. Don't want that underneath there. I want that underneath here. Text content equals content panel title dot text content equals title. So I'm going to add these as parameters. Title content. It's good. Cool. Okay. Pretty much looking the same because we haven't actually fed anything into here yet. So if I do hello world, get the hello, what happened to the world? Content. Okay, so all I just did was add in a title and content set of parameters and set the text content in here. And then I set this text content to these Unicode codes for the arrows. That's all I've done in the past couple minutes. So what's up with, oh, yeah, that's probably what it is. I think the content is hidden by CSS right now, so we're not gonna see it yet. So I'm just gonna move on from that until we get our, the rest of our stuff set up here. So once we, in the next couple minutes, we're going to have it so that only one of these buttons is showing based on basically the state that the panel is in. It'll either be open or closed. And when it's open, it'll show the content. When it's closed, it won't. So I'm going to just work on getting that working real quick. And then we're going to work on dynamically adding this actual panel data into it. So I'm just going to get the panels actually functioning first with just this placeholder hello world content. Excuse me. Cool. So we talked about the toggle function a little bit, but I don't remember if you guys have actually used it yet, at least for anything like super significant. So we're going to actually do some toggling now. So button panel is, button panel is the thing that holds our buttons. So it's basically a box right around here pretty much. So we're going to add an event onto it, add event listener. Click. It's going to be a click event because we're going to click on one of these to open or close it. Putting my event in there. I don't think I actually need the event, but it's just habit for me to put it in there. So I'll leave it there for now. So can anyone remind me what the toggle function does? Let's slow down for a second, talk about what toggling does. Yeah, so basically all it'll do is it's going to reference the class list, and whatever class we put in here, if it's in there, it's going to take it out. If it's not in there, it's going to add it. So basically it's just going to be like flipping on off and on a light switch. So if we look at our CSS, there's already a hide button, which is just display none. So I'm going to add this hide button class on here. Hide button. We'll see what that just does on its own when I run it. So I forget which button it actually is. Yeah, so there. So clicking on it made it go away. And I think that I actually have it. Yeah, it's in the button panel. So whenever I click on either one of these, it'll do that on the open button because I only have it attached to the open button right now. Does that make sense? Is everyone all good on this part? I'm just turning the class on and off. Let me read the chat. Simone, where did I lose you? Let's talk. Yeah, toggle is a built-in function. It's just built into class list. It's right here. Yeah, no worries. If you guys are lost, let me know like where specifically so I can like go back a little bit. So we should have time to go back because there's really, once we get this last part done, there's only one more thing to teach. Okay. Do you want to try debugging it together? If you want, you can share your screen and we can kind of like go over it together. Okay, cool. So that's good. So Robert got lost when I added all this text content stuff. Okay. So these are just Unicode. So this open and close are just the arrow things. They're just like the triangles in there. So that's not like code or anything. That's just like I Googled it. So don't worry about this. Yeah. I'm sure if you just type in like Unicode character codes. Yeah, so like Unicode characters table, all this kind of stuff is in there. And like you have to do all kinds of like weird weird stuff. But this is the one that you would want if you're doing it in your code. You would want the escape sequence. So yeah, so the like triangular bullets, like any non-standard text pretty much is going to be in here, and even standard text, like C has a Unicode or whatever. But yeah, so you can like search some stuff in there. Yeah, David, I'm just pausing real quick so I can review because some people got lost. Simone, where are those parameters being passed in your function? So parameters are being added right in here, and they're just being called to set this text content pretty much. That's the only thing we're using those for right now. And then we're actually calling the function down here. Right now we're just putting like some words in there just as placeholder. A list of constants to bring in a bunch of parts. Are you just like giving me feedback, Warren? I'm not sure if there's a question. Okay, cool. Thanks. Definitely a learning process, guys. Yeah, yeah, world isn't showing up yet because it's being hidden by a CSS class right now. Is anybody still lost? Is there anybody I can help catch up real quick? Okay, cool. If you don't want to like post it out in the chat, feel free to just like message me and I can, I'll read my private messages while we're going. So if anyone has a question they don't feel comfortable asking in the group channel, feel free to just message me and I'll go over whatever it is real quick. Cool. So we added this toggle on the button panel. So that's sweet. So now we're pretty much going to do the same thing on our button close. So I'm going to save this and run it. Ooh. I think I have to add the hide button onto one of these guys. Yeah. So the reason both of them disappeared is because I just toggled it on both of them like a silly face. But if I want one of them to stay here, one of them has to have the class on them to begin with, or it'll just toggle them both off, basically. So I'm going to put the hide button on there. See if this works a little better. Cool. Okay, cool. So that's the functionality we're looking for. So in order to make them not both disappear, in order to have one up at all times, you have to make sure that one of them starts off with the class that you're toggling. So in this case, I hid the open button because we don't want it open by default. Does that make sense? Everyone all good? All right, cool. So the last thing that we have to do is actually make our content show up now. So in order to do that, what do you guys think I have to do for this one? So let's look at our classes. What am I going to want to toggle on here? So content is being hidden by default. So if we look at what classes we've added, panel content by default displays none. So we're going to want to toggle this toggle on function, or not function, class. I'm sorry. So we're going to do panel content dot class list dot toggle, and then we're going to do toggle on. And all that's going to do is change the display from none to block. So it'll show up now. Save and run. Cool. So we've got a fully functional JavaScript component. Have I lost anyone further? Let's take a second to review if anyone's lost right now. Actually, yeah, I guess that's fair, Remington. I'd probably want to add it on to close. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay, that looks better. Let me see. Yeah, here's the CodePen link in case anyone lost it. Cool. Okay. Doesn't look like there's any questions on that so far. So now what we're going to do is work on getting this from being just static words to being these guys. So, excuse me. So this is actually not too bad. What's the first thing that comes to mind if I want to iterate over a list of things? What's probably the easiest way to iterate over an array? A loop, right? Cool. I'm going to use a for each loop because they look nice. So I'm going to grab my panel data dot for each. For each. So for each data, I'm going to pretty much, I'm going to just grab this. So I'm going to do accordion pen child, and then I'm going to create panel. So I'm calling the actual function. So I'm calling my my panel creator. Thank goodness I looked at it. My panel creator function. We can do that. We can call a function inside a function. So what that's going to do is it's going to append the child, and the child is going to be whatever's returned by this. So the panel, because we're returning panel right here. And then we're going to put in data dot title and content. Cool. Data dot title and data dot content. So this should work unless I mess something up. So we got first panel. Sweet. We got it, guys. Yeah, like all this stuff individually is pretty simple stuff, I think. Like this is all stuff, I'm sure you guys can create an element, you can add class lists to it, you can add some content, you can add some styles, you can add an event listener, you can append it. It's just, the tricky part is just remembering where to do all this stuff because you're just doing so many things, right? Like my personal opinion is that you can teach anyone how to do code. Like none of this is crazy complex stuff. It's just a lot of moving parts. Cool. So scroll back to my for each. Sure. So all the for each is doing, again, I'm just iterating over that list of data. And for each data, I'm appending to the accordion the results of this function. And we're just running the function each time we go through the for each loop. Cool. I'm glad that I simplified it for you, Samuel. So, any questions so far, guys? Jose, you're harassing me about my guitar. Repeat my for each explanation. Sure. So panel data is just this array of the objects here. So for each one of those objects, which I've called data, it appends a child to the accordion, and that child is just whatever the result of this function is. So we run that big function that we made, and we feed in as parameters the title and the content of each object. Thanks, Josh. Oh my God, you guys are so embarrassing. I'm like really bad. I'm like even worse at guitar than I am at like free coding live. So before we get devolved too much further, please, any other questions, guys? How's this? I'll play something on my guitar before I leave you guys forever, before the next build week. Warren says, so how is this a component? I still have to take all the CSS with me to a new page. So not necessarily, because this is all going to be in your compiled CSS. Like all this stuff is going to be accessible as long as you've imported it correctly. So you could, if you've imported it in such a way that these classes are available to all the pages you need this stuff on, then you would be able to literally just drag and drop this in there pretty much. And that's how you actually do it in React or any other front-end framework. Like you'll have a nav component, you'll have a footer component, and you'll pretty much probably just like drag and drop those on every page or whatever, essentially. You might have some kind of like sub-menu component that you drop into a couple places. Like these things you just have to make sure that you're importing everything properly. If you're not importing stuff correctly, then you're going to have missing styles, you're going to have missing code. I mean, Josh, I'll be a teacher here still, but I won't be teaching you guys after this section, this web application section. So I have the rest of this sprint and then 2 more sprints and a build week. with you guys, and then you move on to a new instructor. Jose says, so in practice, what would be the order? Plan the page, build the JavaScript, build the CSS. That totally depends on your workplace and how these duties are kind of split up amongst employees. So like at my workplace, we don't really even do much of the CSS and HTML anymore. We have product designers who do most of the styling part. They do all of like the UI, UX research, and then they build wireframes based off of that. And then I'm a full stack developer, so usually I'll start prototyping some functionality for the front end. So like if they have like, oh, the menu has to do this certain thing, I'll create that function and I'll just hook it up to whatever placeholder CSS while they're building the actual CSS. So yeah, at my company personally, I don't do too much CSS anymore. I pretty much just make it decent enough to add JavaScript to until the designers can build the real CSS. Yeah, Robin, I'll be with you guys till build week. And technically I'm still like an instructor of yours during build week. So like you have access to me during that time if you need anything. A wireframe is basically like, let me see, UX wireframe. So a wireframe is usually just, it can be as simple as a sketch like this, just like breaking it out into your HTML boxes, or it can be as complex as like, you know, like actual buttons and like widths and stuff like that. So yeah, so they build out this part. Yeah, it's like a blueprint. That's a great way to describe it. And yeah, Dylan is correct. At a decent sized company, you'll probably have designers who do most of this part. But if you're at a startup, you might have to do some of this on your own. How often do I run into blockers? So my company, our dev department's pretty new. So we're still getting a lot of the kind of like infrastructural work set up, including how we manage projects and stuff like that. So I'll be honest, I get blocked like on a fairly regular basis right now. But we generally, when I get blocked on something, I generally have something else I could work on. So I just go work on that until whatever I was working on initially gets unblocked. Yeah, Robin, a lot of that is informed by your user research as well. And oftentimes business will have some input on that. So like you'll probably have some kind of, you know, a color scheme that you have to adhere to, for example, like your company's marketing, branding colors or whatever. Most places will have an actual style guide. So like this is what buttons look like at our company. They're 65 wide, 32 tall, you know, XYZ, whatever. Like some places have style guides down to like pixel sizes of stuff. Others just have like colors that they use, fonts that they use, stuff like that. So a lot of this stuff is kind of out of our purview, to be honest. But if you end up going more of like a UX design or like front end design heavy role, you might be involved in more of this stuff. Yeah, that's a really good one. So like this is Starbucks's design guide. So they've got like all the stuff that they use in here. So that's a good link. Awesome. Thank you guys for these links. Cool. So it doesn't seem like anyone has any more questions about like the course content for tonight, right? Did I miss anybody? I don't think I did, but if I skipped over anyone's question, please let me know. Yeah, we ran a little quick. I'm kind of surprised by that. I just looked at the clock and I thought it was like going to be like really close to 9:30, but we've got like half an hour. Yeah, sure. I'll just go over it again real quick. Simone, those are Unicode values. So Unicode character codes. So if you just Google this phrase Unicode character codes, it'll come up with a table of what these are. They're just a way of interpreting text. So it's just an escape sequence, excuse me. And these escape sequences are just the triangles, the up and down triangles. That's what they're correlated to. So I'm just setting the text content of our buttons to these triangles, basically. Yeah, this is actually the entire lecture for tonight. So I'm going to do a quick review of this function, and then I'm going to show you guys the homework, and then I'll let you go. Do we have to use those events in the project, or can we choose others? Let me see. I'll talk about the project in 1 sec. I'm just going to go over this function before we. Do we have to use those events? I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure. No, yeah. You don't have to follow the list from DOM2. You can use whatever events you want. Yeah, so let me just review this real quick. So we have our data, and then this is our panel creator function. So we have two parameters, which are title and content. So those are going to be like the title value right here and the content value right here. So initially, we're just creating all of the things that we need. So we're creating some containers. So the panel is literally just like the box around the whole thing. The panel starts at the top of this shadow here and ends at the orange line. The panel bar is, I think that's the one that holds the text content. Panel title, panel content, those should be self-explanatory. Then the button panel is right here and holds the two button open, button close. So once we create those elements, we add our classes to them right here. So this is just a simple class list to add. And these were CSS classes that were already available to us. The CSS was coded for us already. And then here's the Unicode values. So we're just setting the text content right here. So for the buttons, we're doing the triangle up and down for those values. And then we're taking the parameters that we put in and setting them as the text content for the title and the content. And then we are adding an event listener. So the event listener is a click event. We have access to the event object if we want it, but we haven't really used it in here, so I'm actually just going to get rid of it. And then inside of the event, all we're doing is toggling two classes. So toggle, if the element that you have on there, if the element that you're toggling on has the class already, it takes it off, otherwise it adds it. So basically, we're making sure that one of these buttons will have the hide button class on it at all times. So we're only going to have the one button. And then we're toggling toggle on. So that toggle on is what makes the content here visible. And then all we're doing is appending all that stuff in the appropriate order so that it's hooked up to the right parent. And then we're returning a panel. And then we're selecting the accordion, which is what all this stuff is inside of. If we remember all the way back here, we've got that accordion. I'm gonna actually get rid of this now too. So we've got an empty accordion. So that's sweet. So all this stuff has literally just been added to the DOM. There's nothing in the HTML. And this is where we're adding it to the DOM. We're just appending it to, whichever one is appropriate to append it to, returning it. And then once we've got all that stuff returned, we're doing a loop over our panel data. And for each data, we are appending a new panel. And that panel is the result of that function that we created. Cool. So let me read over chat because I just spoke for like 3 minutes without stopping. Yeah, drag and drop is a huge pain. I agree. It's really nice from like a UX perspective, though. David says, the reason we return panel only is because everything is a child or a grandchild of panel, correct? Yep. So if it makes it more helpful to like view it this way, it's essentially like panel, panel bar, panel content, panel title, button, panel content, button, button panel, button open, button close. So we're basically just returning like the head object here. And when it returns, all this other stuff is hooked up to it already. So when you say for each data, so for each index in the array, yeah, I've just called it data here. So that's why I was saying for each data. So for each index in the array, yep. Can more than one accordion be open at a time? Is that bad? By accordion, do you mean panel? Yeah, we can have as many open at once as we want to. They're not related to each other, really. The only thing that they're, the only way that they're related is that they're children of accordion. So like they're not interacting with each other. They just happen to be next to each other. So the toggle doesn't force only one to be open. Oh, I see where you're having confusion. No. So each return here, so when we append the child here, this is like a completely separate thing. So each one of these is a completely separate entity. So like, so we've got, what, we've got 4 things in there. Basically, we're running it 4 times, and this one returns panel 1, and so forth. So like, so we're basically doing like this button that we did down here. We're basically doing this, but in a loop. How did it know what data was? I've named it data right here in the for each loop. David says, so you could code a feature that only allows one dropdown to be open at a time. Yeah, you could. You'd probably have like an extra class toggler or something. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely code that. It wouldn't be that hard. So the loop is what generates all of the content in each piece of the panel, and each piece of the panel is generated at the same time. That makes sense. Yeah, not at exactly the same time, but at close enough to the same time that it appears that they're all there at the same time. That's an important thing to note, and you might have issues with that when we're querying data from a server. When you're looping over data or when you're querying something from somewhere, there's a lag time before that data gets there. So sometimes if your data is taking a long time to get there, you'll end up with like undefined values or like errors or stuff like that because the data is not there when you're trying to use it. So it's not exactly all at the same time, but it's close enough for our purposes right now. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, it's just running the thing. You know, it runs all 4 of these in under a second. for sure, like probably under like a quarter of a second or something. Cool. Anything else, guys? Otherwise, I'll go to the project. It's like Dylan's typing, so I'll give him one moment. Should be noted that there will be a delay in content being added, and users will randomly see elements being added on their pages at certain times. Yep. You can think of it like Facebook or whatever. You know, you're scrolling down your page and you're seeing all the posts and stuff, and you eventually hit that break point where it takes a second to load the next, like, you know, 30 posts or whatever. That's what it's doing. Every time you hit that break point, it's querying Facebook's server to find more posts to generate. So all those posts are just components. When you realize that, you kind of just start breaking everything down into components, and it, you know, your brain just starts firing like that. So yeah, you know, every Facebook post is a component, every Twitter post is a component, probably, you know, etc. Sweet. Looks like y'all are all questioned out. So let's look at the homework. And funnily enough, you guys are making a news feed. Cool. So this is a little bit of everything. So you're going to have to import the less properly. You're going to import the less into index less. And then there's some instructions in line. So if we look at the article.js, they give us a bunch of data. So these are going to be our post datas. Create a function that creates a component. So that's pretty much what we just did, right? So they want you to essentially do what we just did to make an article. And it should mimic this structure if we were doing it in HTML. Add an event listener, so we did that tonight too. Return the component, so we know how to do that. Can map over the data. So we can map is essentially a replacement for that for each loop. So you guys know how to use map from the array methods section. So if you need a refresher on that, you know, just check out the MDN for the syntax. And then step 5, they want you to basically just manually add another article so that you can see that it's working. Add more articles, and then make the menu work. So the menu has that toggle functionality that we pretty much just did. So if we look in the menu, so these are the buttons that are going to be on the menu, and this is the structure that it should follow. And there's basically going to be like a drop-down button that you can click that'll toggle the buttons open or shut. So that's pretty much what we just did. Yep, and that's all the required stuff. And then there's a bunch of stretch goals, so you can check out native CSS animations, play with jQuery, you can play with GreenSock. Yeah, any of these things. You know, if you get to stretch goals on this one, that would be really awesome. Cool. Oh, David said, is accessing the HTML DOM slower compared to other JavaScript statements? It probably depends what the JavaScript entails, honestly, and where you're getting it from. So like, if you're accessing a server, that might be slower than just getting something off the DOM. So my answer is, it depends. Cool. So any questions on this homework assignment? A lot of it is pretty much just doing what we just did in class. So you guys have a blueprint to work off of here. Yeah, green sock is no joke. Like, I think you guys have probably picked up on the fact that I'm not like a decorative, like pretty styling guy. I'm more of a JavaScript functionality guy. So green sock is like magic to me. So if you're someone that's really good at animations, that's like you're already better at me than you're already better than me at something related to JavaScript. So great job. Cool. So I'm gonna link this one more time. So here's the code for today. And unless anyone has any last minute questions, I'll let you go a couple minutes ahead of time. Sweet. Any questions I haven't answered, feel free to PM me, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. So you'll have a good night.